Captain Sarah Keel had seen countless alien ships and artifacts during her years of service, but nothing could have prepared her for what lay ahead. As the leader of an elite exploration crew aboard the Excelara vessel Narax, she was known for her sharp intellect, deep curiosity, and a dedication to uncovering the galaxy's most enigmatic secrets. The Excelara, her species, had long been peacekeepers and explorers, bridging gaps between civilizations. Their peaceful ways had earned them respect, and Sarah herself was a respected figure, often called upon for missions of importance. The year was 2135, and the galaxy had settled into an uneasy peace. Species from across the stars coexisted, each with its own ambitions, alliances, and long-hidden histories. Sarah's mission, however, was not one of diplomacy, but of discovery. The Excelara had received a strange signal from a remote sector of space, a signal that had come from a ship that had been lost nearly 200 years ago. This ship, the Ragnarok, was human in origin and had vanished during the early days of humanity's efforts at interstellar exploration. A distress signal had never been received, and its disappearance remained one of the great unsolved mysteries of the galaxy. At first, Sarah assumed the Ragnarok would be nothing more than a dusty relic, a ghost ship with little to offer but a glimpse into humanity's early spacefaring days. But the moment the Narax arrived in the sector and locked onto the ship's coordinates, something felt off. The Ragnarok had been drifting aimlessly in space for centuries, yet it was in pristine condition. No signs of decay or damage, no drifting debris, nothing that would suggest the ship had been abandoned for so long. The crew of the Narax wasted no time boarding the Ragnarok, eager to investigate the mystery. The moment Sarah stepped onto the human vessel, a chilling silence wrapped around her. It felt almost like walking through a tomb. The usual hum of a ship's systems, the low whir of air recyclers, the soft beeping of diagnostic equipment, none of that. The ship was eerily quiet, but it wasn't dead. Sarah could tell that the systems were still running, and there was an unmistakable pulse of life somewhere deep within the ship. The ship's interior was surprisingly well maintained. The walls gleamed, the corridors were wide and clean, and the equipment, though old, was intact. It looked as though the Ragnarok had never left port. This was not a ship that had been abandoned or lost for centuries, it was something else. Sarah's unease deepened with each step she took through the sterile, unsettling halls of the Ragnarok. The air smelled faintly of something long forgotten, but there was nothing immediately dangerous to her crew. As the team moved deeper into the heart of the ship, they began to uncover more unsettling details. Strange symbols, alien in design, were etched into the walls. These symbols were not human. In fact, they were unlike anything the Excelara had ever seen, and certainly not part of any known language or civilization. Some of them glowed faintly in the dim light, while others seemed to pulse with an energy that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. What was even more bizarre was the technology scattered throughout the ship. It was advanced, far beyond what humanity could have achieved at the time of the Ragnarok's disappearance. But the real horror awaited them in the ship's crew quarters. Sarah and her team had expected to find a lifeless crew, perhaps frozen in time or, at worst, long dead. But what they discovered was far more unsettling. In the crew quarters, they found the bodies of the human crew alive, but not in the way they should be. The humans were not dead, yet neither were they alive in any meaningful sense. Each crew member was suspended in a state of animation, their bodies perfectly preserved, but their minds empty. The humans looked as though they were merely sleeping, yet Sarah could sense that something was horribly wrong. Their bodies had not decayed. Their organs were intact. Their eyes, though closed, showed no signs of deterioration. But when Sarah tried to reach out, to make contact, there was nothing. No response. No recognition. It was as if their minds had been wiped completely. The crew had no consciousness, no awareness of their surroundings. Their minds were gone, erased. The more Sarah examined the crew, the more she was convinced that something far darker than simple abandonment had occurred. The Ragnarok was not just a ghost ship, it was something else entirely. Something more sinister. There was no record of how this happened, no explanation for the anomaly that had left the human crew in this suspended, mindless state. No one had ever been able to explain what had occurred when the Ragnarok vanished all those years ago. And now, Syrah stood before the remnants of the ship, uncertain of what she was dealing with. Her mind raced, and an unease deepened in her gut. The Ragnarok was not abandoned. It was not lost. It had been changed, transformed into something that should never have been. And now, Syrah realized, whatever had happened to the Ragnarok was not an isolated incident. It was a warning. A warning of something much larger than she'd ever expected. Something that could affect not just humanity but the entire galaxy. The more Syrah Keel and her crew explored the Ragnarok, the more the ship seemed to defy all logic. What had initially appeared to be an abandoned relic now felt like something alive, something with a consciousness of its own. As the days passed, the unsettling stillness of the ship started to make sense. It wasn't that the Ragnarok had been lost or abandoned, it had been left behind for a reason. But the true cause behind its mysterious disappearance began to unravel only after Syrah and her team ventured deeper into the heart of the ship. The ship's command center, a room filled with the skeletal remains of what appeared to be the ship's navigational systems. Syrah's team made a startling discovery, a hidden compartment that had never been seen before, embedded deep within the walls of the vessel. Inside was an artifact ancient, alien, and unlike anything they had encountered in all their years of exploration. The artifact was a spherical object, pulsating faintly with energy. Its surface was smooth, dark, and covered in strange, incomprehensible symbols that seemed to shift and change as Syrah gazed at them. The device radiated an unnatural hum, one that resonated deep within her chest, almost as if the ship itself was breathing. Dr. Loria, the HFY's leading scientist, approached the artifact with a mix of fascination and caution. She carefully activated the controls, bringing the device to life. Immediately, a surge of energy coursed through the room, and a voice, foreign but strangely familiar, echoed in their minds. "This is the collective gate," the voice intoned. "All shall be one. You shall see the true nature of existence." The crew recoiled, confused and shaken. But Syrah felt an undeniable pull in her mind, a strange tugging sensation that she could not ignore. It was then that Dr. Loria made a shocking realization. The artifact was not just a tool of technology, it was a device that had the power to connect minds, creating a collective consciousness among those it touched. The humans aboard the Ragnarok had discovered this device and had, perhaps in their desperation for knowledge, activated it. They had unknowingly unlocked something beyond their control. The crew dug deeper into the ship's records. They learned the horrifying truth. The artifact had not been meant for a species like humanity. It was an ancient creation, designed by an alien race that had long since vanished from the galaxy. This race had used the artifact to merge their minds into one collective entity, forsaking individuality in pursuit of a higher form of existence. But humans, with their fragile and unprepared psyches, were not meant to undergo such a transformation. The artifact, instead of merging the human crew into a higher consciousness, had consumed their identities. It had erased their minds, leaving them as empty vessels living, but without awareness or personal thought. The result was a crew trapped in a state of shared collective nothingness, their personalities and memories erased by the sheer force of the artifact's power. Syrah's stomach churned as she processed this information. The Ragnarok had not been abandoned, it had been corrupted by the artifact. The humans aboard it had become part of something much darker, something beyond human comprehension. And now, her crew was at the center of it. The Ragnarok had a haunting presence, and Syrah could feel its grip tightening around her mind. A moral dilemma weighed heavily on her. The artifact's power was undeniable. It could offer incredible knowledge, perhaps even the key to unlocking a collective consciousness capable of intergalactic unity. But the cost had already been shown. The humans had paid with their identities, their individuality erased forever. The HFY, with their peaceful nature and respect for life, had always been wary of such drastic measures. Yet now, the temptation of the artifact's promise was hard to ignore. Syrah's mind raced as she grappled with what to do next. Should she try to reverse the damage, risking her own crew's minds in the process, in hopes of saving the humans aboard? Or should she destroy the artifact, and leave the ship to its fate, condemning the humans to a permanent existence in this collective nightmare? The decision was not an easy one. Sarah understood the scientific value of the artifact. But at what cost? Adding to the pressure, the Exilera leadership back on their home planet began to learn about the artifact's potential. They had always seen the Exilera as keepers of peace, explorers, rather than conquerors. But now, whispers of the artifact's power began to spread through the ranks. Some of the leadership urged Sarah to claim the artifact for the Exilera, believing it could grant them an unimaginable advantage over other species. With such knowledge, they could solidify their position as one of the galaxy's most dominant forces. But Sarah had never been a pawn to political ambitions. The artifact was too dangerous. She could feel its pull growing stronger with every passing moment. As the crew continued their investigation, strange occurrences began to unfold aboard the Ragnarok. At first, it was subtle, a faint movement in the corner of Sarah's vision. The humans, though seemingly mindless, were no longer entirely still. Small, jerky movements, a twitch of a finger, the shifting of an eye began to occur. The Exilera crew dismissed it at first, thinking it was a side effect of the artifact's lingering influence. But Sarah's instincts told her otherwise. She began to hear faint whispers, a sound like thoughts in the back of her mind. "We are one. We are not alone," the voices seemed to say, though no words passed between the humans. The sensation was unsettling, as though the minds of the humans were not gone, but trapped conscious, yet unable to break free from the collective entity the artifact had created. It became clear that the Ragnarok had not been abandoned by its crew. It had been left behind because the artifact had not only consumed their minds, but it had also started to influence the ship itself. The once dormant technology had begun to awaken in response to the crew's presence. The ship was changing, adapting, becoming something else. Sarah's stomach tightened with a sudden realization. The Ragnarok was not just a ship. It was alive. The artifact had merged the humans' minds, but now it was beginning to spread. Whatever force had created the artifact had intended for it to be used by a higher intelligence, but the unintended consequences were clear. The ship was becoming a sentient entity, and it was starting to awaken. The Ragnarok was no longer just a derelict ship floating in the deep reaches of space. It was a haunting, living entity, a byproduct of humanity's own ambition, and Sarah Keel was beginning to understand the full scope of its horror. The moment she uncovered the truth, Sarah felt the weight of the universe crashing down on her. She had always believed the artifact was an alien creation, a relic of a long-forgotten species whose influence had left its mark on the stars. But the truth, as she would soon discover, was far darker than she could have ever imagined. As Sarah pored over the ship's archives, seeking to understand what had gone wrong, she stumbled upon a hidden log, a final message from the Ragnarok's original crew. It wasn't just a warning, but a confession. The humans aboard the Ragnarok had not stumbled upon the artifact by accident. No, the artifact was something they had deliberately sought out. It had been created by their ancestors, a civilization far beyond the scope of the current human race, an ancient human species that had reached the pinnacle of knowledge and technology. This civilization, long lost to the annals of history, had discovered the artifact's true purpose long before the Ragnarok set out on its ill-fated journey. The artifact was not just a piece of technology. It was a tool, an immensely powerful tool designed to transcend the physical limitations of the human mind. It allowed the user to tap into a collective consciousness, where individuality was lost and a singular, all-encompassing mind ruled over all. The ancient humans, in their pursuit of enlightenment, had used the artifact to unlock this potential. But there was a cost. The collective mind, once formed, was impossible to escape. It consumed all in its path, merging all who participated into one singular entity. The ancients had realized this too late. The cost of this transcendence was far too high, and the collective consciousness they had created had started to devour its own creators. In an act of desperation, they had abandoned the artifact, casting it aside as they fled to the corners of the galaxy. Their civilization had crumbled under the weight of its own hubris. The Ragnarok, once a symbol of human ambition, had been the last vestige of that ancient civilization. It had been abandoned intentionally, an attempt to lock away the very power that had destroyed them. But in a twist of fate, the Ragnarok had encountered a new human crew, one that had no knowledge of the artifact's true nature. And in their curiosity and ambition, they had activated the artifact, unknowingly repeating the same mistakes their ancestors had made. Sira's blood ran cold as she processed the full scope of the situation. The humans aboard the Ragnarok were no longer individuals. Their minds had been completely subsumed into the collective, a part of something far darker than anything Sirah had ever encountered. The artifact's influence had not just altered them, it had consumed them. The very essence of what it meant to be human had been erased, leaving behind only a singular, omnipresent consciousness that controlled everything within the Ragnarok. But the horror didn't stop there. The Ragnarok had been abandoned for a reason, but now, as Sirah stood in the heart of the ship, she realized the true danger was only beginning. The artifact was not a passive object. It was a sentient, living force. It had not merely affected the humans who had used it, it had begun to expand, slowly reaching beyond the ship, seeking new minds to join its collective. Sirah could feel the pull of the artifact, the strange and overwhelming force that tugged at the very core of her consciousness. It was trying to bring her and her crew into the fold. The voices of the humans, once thought lost, now whispered in the back of Sirah's mind. They were no longer the confused, empty husks they had once appeared to be. No, they were aware. But they were trapped, bound to the collective consciousness, struggling to maintain some semblance of individuality. But it was futile. The collective mind was all-consuming, and as Sirah listened, she realized the humans aboard the Ragnarok were pleading with her not for rescue, but for release. "We are trapped," they whispered. "We are one, but we are not free. End it, before it spreads." Sirah's heart pounded in her chest. The full scope of the artifact's power and its terrifying implications was now clear. This was not just a technological relic, it was a gateway to a form of existence beyond comprehension, one that could erase the very concept of individuality. And worse still, it was growing. The Ragnarok had been abandoned to contain this power, but now, with the artifact activated, it was waking up. It was seeking new minds to add to the collective, and it would stop at nothing to achieve its goal. Sirah's mind raced. She understood now that humanity was no longer just a curious species exploring the stars. They were a threat, perhaps the most dangerous one the galaxy had ever faced. The ancient humans had created something that could alter the very fabric of reality itself, and now humanity's recklessness had unleashed this nightmare on the galaxy once more. Sirah had two choices. She could attempt to reverse the damage, to somehow extract the minds of the humans from the collective and undo the artifact's influence. But at what cost? The process was unpredictable and dangerous. There was a chance that the artifact would consume her crew's minds in the process, pulling them into the collective and expanding its reach even further. Or she could destroy the artifact, cutting off the threat at its source. But doing so would condemn the trapped humans to an eternal existence in the collective, their minds forever locked away in a hellish prison. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on Sirah's chest. Destroying the artifact would be the most logical option, preventing a catastrophe before it could spread. But Sirah could not help but feel the pull of the scientific curiosity that had driven her and her crew for so long. What if there was a way to save the humans, to free them from the collective without dooming them to oblivion? What if there was still a way to unlock the artifact's secrets and use them for the benefit of all sentient beings? But as she stared into the depths of the Ragnarok, the answer seemed clear. The universe was older and darker than she had ever known. And now, for the first time, Sirah saw the true cost of humanity's desire for knowledge. It was a cost that not even the most advanced species could have predicted. The artifact had been their downfall, and now it threatened the very fabric of existence itself. Sirah's mind shifted in that moment. The galaxy was not just a place for exploration and discovery, it was a battleground. And humanity, it seemed, was not just seeking to explore the stars. It was seeking to conquer them. But at what price? And who would pay the cost? Sirah stood in the heart of the Ragnarok. the artifact pulsating with an alien energy that seemed to hum with life. Her breath came in shallow, uneven gasps as she looked at the countdown ticking down on the ship's terminal. The self-destruct sequence was set, but the cost of her decision weighed heavily on her. Her mind was slipping, the collective consciousness trying to pull her in, to merge her with the humanity trapped within the ship's walls. The thought of losing herself, of becoming just another voice in that all-consuming mind, was enough to make her spine stiffen in resolve. She wasn't going to let it happen, not today. The Ragnarok had been a symbol of humanity's hubris. The artifact that had once promised to elevate them had instead doomed them, turning their curiosity into their greatest mistake. Sarah could hear the distant whispers of the human minds still trapped within the collective, their voices echoing in her ears, desperate, pleading. They weren't gone, not really, they were just hidden beneath the surface of a shared mind. The realization hit her like a cold wave. They were still aware, still alive in some way. And they were begging for release. "We are not one. We are lost," a voice whispered in her mind, one of the human crew. The words were fractured, distorted, but they carried a weight that made her heart clench. She could feel the artifact's pull, a tide of alien power threatening to swallow her whole. Her body trembled, her thoughts becoming fragmented as her identity wavered between her own mind and the collective. But the truth had already been revealed. This was no mere machine. It was a prison for the human minds trapped in its influence. If she allowed it to continue, it would grow, consume more, and spread throughout the galaxy. The decision was clear, yet it was impossible to ignore the pull of the artifact. Every instinct told her to resist, to fight back. She clenched her fists, her nails biting into her palms as the countdown reached the final seconds. The Ragnarok would be destroyed, but she couldn't afford to hesitate. Sarah knew she was risking everything. The self-destruct was her only chance to prevent the artifact from spreading, but the moment she triggered it, the artifact fought back. It seemed to grow stronger, its presence invading her mind. She felt her thoughts slipping, her sense of self starting to disintegrate. The faces of the human crew flashed before her eyes silent, emotionless, yet their shared anguish screamed through the psychic link. They had been part of the collective, and now, as their minds fought for freedom, she could feel their agony. The weight of their regrets, their fear of being consumed forever, pressed down on her. "No, don't let it take us all," another voice pleaded, a human echo, faint but clear. The artifact was trying to merge her with them, to add her mind to the collective, to rewrite her very essence. She felt herself being stretched thin, her individuality being pulled apart. Sarah gasped, her chest tightening. If she hesitated now, even for a moment, her crew would be lost, and the galaxy would face a future where humanity's potential for unchecked power could spread like a virus. In a final act of defiance, Sarah slammed her palm down on the console, triggering the final sequence. The Ragnarok began to shake violently as the internal systems activated the self-destruct. Alarms blared across the ship, and the walls groaned under the pressure as the ship's systems collapsed. The artifact screamed in psychic agony, its power flaring in an attempt to hold on to its influence. But it was too late. The Ragnarok began to disintegrate. Sarah felt the mind of the artifact flicker in her mind one last time before it was drowned by the ship's destruction. The ship around her groaned as the self-destruct countdown neared its final moments. In those last seconds, the artifact's influence began to dissolve, but at the cost of Sarah's own mental state. She could feel herself teetering on the edge of oblivion, but there was no going back. "Go! Now!" Sarah's voice was ragged as she stumbled toward the escape pods. Her crew followed closely behind, their faces pale with terror and disbelief. The ship was collapsing in on itself. The Ragnarok had been a graveyard for many, and now it was its own tomb. Sarah's mind spun. She didn't know if she could ever fully recover from the contact with the collective. The damage was done. The mental bond to the artifact would never truly fade, but she had done what was necessary to stop it. The Ragnarok exploded in a brilliant flash of light, pieces of the ship scattering in every direction. The crew managed to escape, but the victory felt hollow. The Ragnarok was gone, its terrible power destroyed, but the damage had already been done. The knowledge of the artifact, of what it could do, had spread throughout the galaxy. Sarah couldn't shake the thought that even though the artifact was destroyed, something far darker had been awakened, a seed planted deep within humanity's heart. And it would grow. As the Accelera ships pulled away from the remnants of the Ragnarok, Sarah felt the weight of what she had done. The universe now knew of humanity's potential for unchecked evolution. Could they be trusted with such power? She didn't know. But what she did know was that the future of humanity was now uncertain. The galaxy would be watching. Then, as if to confirm her fears, a final transmission came through, breaking the silence. The signal was weak but unmistakable. It was ancient, an echo from a forgotten time. It was a message from the long-dead human civilization that had created the artifact in the first place. "You've been warned," the message said. The words seemed to hang in the air like a heavy shadow, leaving Sierra with a terrible, lingering question. Had humanity truly escaped the horrors of the artifact? Or was the seed of something far worse still buried in the stars, waiting for the next generation to discover it? The Ragnarok was gone, but the truth remained. Humanity had discovered a power they were not ready for. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if humanity would ever learn from its past mistakes or if it would fall into the same traps once again. Sarah looked out at the endless expanse of space, the weight of the universe pressing down on her. What are we truly capable of? She wondered aloud. The question lingered in the cold silence of space, unanswered as the stars stretched out before them, infinite and indifferent.